All right. Hey, welcome to the Cybersecurity Insurance webinar. My name is Ben Grimion. I'm going to be your moderator today for our panelists. And we're going to take a little time here, let everybody log in, get signed into this webinar. We've got a number of folks on here. This by far has been our most popular webinar from a registration perspective. So really appreciate everybody jumping on here and joining us because obviously this is something on a lot of folks' minds. And while we wait for folks to jump on here, I like to kind of start with a little bit of audience participation here. And that, I like to start these off with what happened on this day in history. And I've got two really good ones here today. I'd like to first open it up to, and anybody is welcome to answer this either in the chat or come off mute. But on this day, July 27th, back in 1953, something pretty important happened. If anybody's got an idea of it or is very fast at Googling, like you to answer that. What happened this day that involved America, involved the Asian country
Korean
back
War,
in, there you
armistice.
go. Correct. The armistice agreement ending the Korean War was signed, and I'm not going to say where, in Central Korea. I don't think I could name that. Good answer.
Panmunjom.
Panmunjom. There you go. Good. Appreciate it. Also, a back in 2003, a comedy legend had actually died at the age of 100 on this day in 2003. Who was that?
George
Anybody got
Burns.
any? Close? Same kind of air, obviously.
Bob Hope.
He spent a lot of time in the
Yeah, there you
military
go.
organizations.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Bob Hope is that individual there, so appreciate it. Well, we'll probably still have some folks jump on here while we get started, but heck, let's go ahead and get started and jump in here. We've got some great panelists joining us here today, and this is going to be a very interactive panelist discussion. We're going to have some time to ask some questions there at the end, but if there's something on your mind during this webinar, feel free to put it in the chat. I'll be watching the chat, as well as another one of my peers here at Davenport Group will be watching that chat, and we'll bring up those questions to our panelists as we have them here. So what I'd like to first do is, if you're new to Davenport Group, I'd really like you to understand who we are. So Davenport Group, we are a full-scale IT solution provider. So what that simply means is we can help you out with any type of IT solution from, I like to say, from mouse to the cloud, and really anywhere in between. We're going to be focusing a lot on security today, a lot around cybersecurity insurance and how to adhere to those guidelines. But you can see here, there's a lot of other solutions that we focused on, from hyperconverged, security, storage, networking, and so on. We provide all those types of solutions. We have tons of experience. Heck, I've been doing this for 20 years. And we also have engineers on staff who implement these solutions, train you on these solutions, and we stand behind those solutions 100%. And that's really the difference maker when it comes to Davenport Group, is that we focus solely on that relationship with our customers. So the way that I like to picture this in your mind is, we provide that solution to you. Let's say it's a data center solution. Let's say it's a security solution. Well, you're going to be working with that same group over and over again, that same account executive over and over again. I've had the same customers for 10 years, and that is very rare in the IT field. So that's really what makes Davenport Group different, is you're going to work with the same folks over and over again on this project and that project and so on. And if you want us to manage and maintain it, we can do all those pieces for you. So we're really that full scale IT solution provider. So I'd also like to introduce myself, Ben Grimion. I'm a senior account executive here at Davenport Group. I've been with Davenport Group for 10 years, but I've been doing this for 20 years in the IT industry. Started over at Dell and then came over to Davenport Group back in 2013. I'm based here in Oklahoma City. Lived here for a number of years, and avid Saints fan. New Orleans Saints. I bought my tickets yesterday for my
Who
my
dat?
first game. Yeah, who dat is right. Bought my tickets for. I go to a game every year, so really excited about going to see him play the Bears later on. But we have a number of panelists here, and I'd like to kind of go around the horn and let them introduce themselves. They're all related to security in some way, shape, or form, and they're definitely related and have been involved in the cybersecurity insurance conversations. And what I'd like to start it off with, one of my favorite is Brian Bennett from Davenport Group. Brian?
Thanks, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Brian Bennett, so I am the field CISO here at Davenport Group. So not only am I responsible for security for Davenport Group itself, but also helping our customers and their security as well. So a little bit about me, my background. I was an IT director for about 10 years as a DoD contractor in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, where I was actually a Davenport Group customer myself. So they actually got me to jump the fence a couple of years ago to come stand up the security practice here. But I've been fortunate enough to touch just about everything there is in the IT stack. So been there, done that, and got a t-shirt hanging somewhere. But most recently, worked in the Charlotte area for an MSP where I provided vCISO and vCIO services to some of our customers. And so expanding that here at Davenport Group so we can help our customers and get better suited.
Absolutely. And Brian's been a tremendous resource here at Davenport Group ever since. And then from KnowBe4, we have Eric on here. Eric?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And Ben said earlier, we have a great group of panelists here and then me. But my name's Eric Crone. I'm a security awareness advocate. Now, what is that? Okay, so I get to do stuff like this, which is kind of cool. But I've been in the industry since back in the 1990s. I started off with Lantastic and Windows 3.1, if you all remember those days, right? And worked in a whole lot of different areas. I've worked in healthcare. I've worked in large manufacturing. And I also spent about 10 years as an Army contractor. I was out in Fort Huachuca working for, at the time it was called the CTNOSC, and then we changed to the Second Regional Cyber Center Western Hemisphere, which is a mouthful to say when you answered the phone. But ended up the security manager there. We did the network infrastructure for all of the post camps and stations in North America, across CONUS, and the Active Directory. I helped deploy the Active Directory for the U.S. Army. So got to see some pretty cool stuff. And like I said, now I'm in this interesting role where I get to share experience and stuff like that, almost like like a researcher type role. It's kind of cool. It's different, that's for sure. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Eric. And then next we have Michael Crean from Solutions Granted. Michael?
Well, thanks, everyone. I appreciate this opportunity to join you. My name is Michael Crean. I'm the CEO and founder of Solutions Granted, and we're a strategic partner with the Davenport Group, providing those cybersecurity services. Really, at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're providing the people and the process and the technology to look for, find, identify, and hopefully eradicate with extreme prejudice those things that go bump in the night so that you can sleep peacefully. And seeing as how we've got this whole DoD thing going on here, I'm going to jump on the bandwagon and roll with it. I was fortunate and very thankful that I got to spend 9 years of my adult life in the Army, kind of running around the world, chasing bad guys and doing fun things and jumping out of planes.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you for joining us here. And then last but not least, we have Larry from DataStream Insurance.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate being here. Thanks, everybody, for attending. Yeah, my name's Larry Metter. I'm the channel chief with DataStream Insurance. And, I'm going to have to take the DoD train off the tracks because I've never worked for DoD or been in the Army or anything. But I'm going to pick up and go on a New Orleans Saints train because I am, too, a New Orleans Saints fan. So we hadn't discovered that before. So,
just found this out. Awesome.
We're just finding this out. But so anyway, don't hold it against me if you're, Tampa Bay or somebody like that, but that's okay. But yeah, I've been in the channel for about 20 years. I've been with DataStream now for about 18, maybe 20 months now. And yeah, I kind of help build our partner teams called partner acquisition teams, different things like that. And I speak at a lot of different conferences on cyber insurance and, what is it? What's the importance of it? All of that good stuff. So thrilled to be here.
Absolutely. Thrilled to have all four of you here. to join us here. And really, this is an education session for those that are attending this webinar. So this is for you. And I like to remind you of that, because if you have questions, guarantee somebody else that's listening on here is going to have the exact same question out there. So feel free to raise your virtual hand there in Teams, or just take yourself off mute, or just put your question in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat for those and bring it up at the right appropriate time if we can't just answer it in the chat there. So we'll start with the questions. And the first question is going to be for you, Larry. What is cybersecurity insurance, and how is it different from general liability coverage? Because, we need to start with that kind of base layer and getting a good understanding there.
Yeah, so cyber insurance is kind of a different beast from other products, other insurance products out there. Sorry about that. And it's really designed to help protect your business against cyber crimes. We're talking ransomware, malware, DDoS, data breaches, different things like that. It's designed to make you whole when something occurs. And as you probably have heard, and you'll probably hear it on this call, it's really not a matter of if something happens, it's really more a matter of when something happens. So cyber insurance has really started increasing in popularity, simply because obviously, the bad guys are out there. It's a dynamic environment, because these bad guys, the bad threat actors, are out there changing things daily. And you see the big businesses get shut down, like the Colonial Pipeline, or here recently the Move It stuff that was going on in the government and things like that. But what you don't hear about are the 800 to 900 attacks a day happening to small to medium-sized businesses. So that's why cyber insurance is really starting to rise in popularity, and it's really something that you should be considering as part of your overall cybersecurity strategy. So Ben, hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah, that definitely helps start it off here. And to dive a little deeper into that, Eric, the next question is for you. So why has cybersecurity insurance become so important?
Yeah. So, well, I'll say this, I work for KnowBe4. We have a security awareness training and simulated phishing platform. We concentrate on the human element. And I do a lot of talks in a lot of places, and I end up talking to people a lot about their experiences, right? So I'll do talks and I'll ask people like, hey, how many of you have been hit by a gift card scam? And inevitably hands go up in the audience. So I'll talk to them about that. And we have conversations. And what I found is the cost of these breaches, of these incidents, is so much higher than a lot of people understand, right? They miscalculated. They go, oh, the ransoms, let's say it's $1 million. Okay, so I got $1 million there and 100K in cleanup fees, but that's just not how it works. It's incredibly expensive these days to have a breach or something go on. And we are seeing this with Move It. I mean, there's stuff going on constantly with Move It. But this is why it's become so much more important. It can devastate an organization. There's time off. You may have to pay people. You may have to do all this kind of stuff. And the cost of recovery, including bringing in these, these people that have to figure out how the people got in and whether they left back doors. Because if you don't do that, it's trouble, right? There was a place in the UK that got hit. They paid £2.4 million in ransom. Okay. And about a month later, they got everything up and running. Everything was good, but they didn't get the folks out of their system, right? So there were backdoors, and the bad actors just hit the go button again, and they're another £2.4 million into recovering the second time. So there's so many more expenses that people don't realize with that. And frankly, I mean, it doesn't take much to ring up a pretty hefty bill. I'm sure Larry's seen a lot of that coming around.
Very much so. Very much so. You're so spot on with all of that.
Yeah. But it's also a good point, because you brought up one of the things that I see quite often that is often forgotten is, what are you going to do during the downtime? Are you going to be able to pay your employees? Are you going to be able to process orders, take money, pay money? Factor in that downtime. And a lot of that type of stuff just gets overlooked as to what the actual cost was. And then you start looking into the reputation of the business, and you can't put a price tag on that.
Yeah. If you've never been a victim of it or been close to someone that's a victim of it, it's eye-opening the first time you realize just how far down these little rabbit holes these things go that you had never thought of beforehand.
Yeah. And I know with the folks that are on here, they probably have tons of stories that they could share as a part of this as to why it's important to them. So I think it's definitely something that's on everybody's mind out there. So we'd like to kind of open it up to everyone that's on here. We're going to have a poll question. And we're going to go ahead and post that. It'll pop up in your teams. If you could answer that, that'd be great. And the question is simply a yes or no. Do you currently have cybersecurity insurance? And just so you know, Davenport Group doesn't sell cybersecurity insurance. This is really just education. We're not trying to find out there, but we just wanted to get a poll of everybody that's on the call here and to see kind of how important that is to you.
I'm looking forward to seeing the results of this, honestly, because it does vary so much depending on the audience. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this turns out. Larry's over here sharpening his pencil, like,
yeah,
Yeah, because the follow-up question.
Still, Larry.
Yeah, exactly. The
That's a part of
follow-up
it.
question I want to ask is, how many of these are riders off of a CGL or actual standalone cyber insurance policies? Because big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So it looks like the results on here, we got about 80-20 split. So 80% yes, 20% no. So a little bit surprising for me, who's seen Ben firsthand with some effects, and definitely Brian, he and I've spent some late nights helping out some folks recover. So I think this is definitely warranted as far as this conversation here. So thank you for your feedback on that, and we'll continue on with our questions here. Or did anybody did that surprise Larry or Eric or anybody on here?
Surprised me. I didn't expect
Yeah.
to see it that high.
Same. I didn't expect to see it this high.
Yeah, and it's good to see it that high. It's good to see that people are looking at this. I think there's an important part here, though, too, and I know we'll talk about this later, and that is, do you know what coverage you carry? Because what I've seen happen in the past, too, is especially, it was real prevalent back, 2020, early times there. But people were not just not insured, but underinsured. So,
Right.
you had ransomware going on that would recover from something there. And they go, okay, it cost me $1 million to recover from ransomware. I'm going to have $1 million policy. But then as part of that same thing, when Maze came around in late 2019 and started exfiltrating data, now you also have the cost of a data breach on top of the costs of getting your organization back up and running. And so a single event cap could be reached pretty darn quickly if people weren't careful, because you had both the cost of that ransomware event and the cost associated with the breach as well, and they weren't prepared for that 1-2 punch.
Yeah, and I think Mike's kind of hitting it on the head in here. Exactly what you said there, Eric. In the chat, he's like, "We have insurance, but it's on the coverage there." But Brian, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, there's even a third punch. There's several organizations that we work with. They fall under some kind of regulatory framework that after it all wraps up, now here comes all the fines for everything once they figure out what happened and fingers start pointing.
Yeah, I didn't want to use the R word, man. It's regulatory stuff gets ugly.
And it doesn't even have to be regulatory compliance anymore, because if you look at all of the states out there that are putting their cyber legislation in place and telling small businesses, medium businesses, all businesses, you have to do this. And if you are compromised, you have to report it. And you have to do it in a timely manner. And then depending on what happens from the findings, I mean, you could find yourself paying even more money.
Yeah. And something I like to remind a lot of the IT professionals, because I think that's mostly who we have on this listening to us today, is this isn't something that's just on IT anymore. This is something that needs to be a business conversation with all the leadership of your organization to really understand what's needed from a cyber insurance provider, but then also the implications, the things that you don't think about as far as IT. Of the results of a ransomware attack or the results of getting your cyber insurance provider involved. And so I just want to really reiterate that this is just not on IT. What we want to do today here is really educate those IT professionals with some of the talking points to bring it up to upper management here. And so that's why we're doing this. So moving on to questions here, I got one from Michael. So Michael, what are the requirements for cybersecurity insurance coverage?
Well, I think number one requirement is tell the truth. You know, if you don't know it, don't answer yes, don't answer yo, don't just say it because you think. Do the right thing and make it a tabletop exercise for the entire company and all of the stakeholders so that everybody is participating in this, because insurance companies, they're out there to take care of you, but at the end of the day, there's this little thing, the house always wins. And so if you answer something and you're maybe not answering it the right way, you could find yourself in trouble. And then you find yourself in trouble with something called insurance fraud. So make sure you know what you're answering and why you're answering it. That's number one. And two, verify. If the executives of the company have approved, let's talk about multi-factor authentication. It's been approved. So as an executive, I'll assume it's done. 6 months ago, I said, do it. Everybody's doing it, or at least I'm doing it. So therefore, everybody's doing it. You have to come back and ask the question, are we implemented? Are we doing it the right way? Are we going to do this? So again, going back to making sure you're doing it for the right reason and answering the questions in truth is going to be the biggest thing when it comes to it. And if you want the insurance and they say you have to have it, well, then you have to have it. That's how it works.
Larry, Eric, any thoughts there?
Yep, I was just going to add to that real quick. I mean, first off, Michael's spot on talking about, you got to tell the truth on these applications. If you don't know, don't say yes, don't say no, find out the answer. Because if you do say yes, that you've got, for example, what Michael just said, you've got MFA in place on every device, but then you have some type of security incident and it's found that it came in through a device that didn't have MFA. Guess what? That insurance company is not going to pay out in most instances. So, and typically what we really see from an insurance requirement perspective is there's basically 5 things that most carriers are looking for you to have in place as a bare minimum. And that is MFA, multi-factor authentication. We all hate it, but it does, it's not foolproof, but it does deter and work quite a bit. Offsite or cloud-based backups done on a regular schedule. Endpoint detection and response, which is kind of a glorified antivirus. It could be EDR, it could be MDR, which is managed detection and response, or extended detection and response. End user security awareness training, again, done on a regular basis, not once a year. And also make sure you're documenting how your employees are scoring on these security awareness exams, if we want to call them that, or test, and change them up too. And then last but not least, privileged access management, password management. Don't just change your password once a year. Hopefully you've got a policy in place that's requiring employees to change it at least once every 90 days, different things like that. So that's what most carriers are looking for right now. So Eric, I don't know if you had something else you wanted to add there. I saw you were shaking your head a little bit.
Yeah, this is always such an interesting point here. And I love the point about don't lie about it, because you could be standing there with a large bill coming in and the insurance company's going, you said you did this. And that's not on the insurance company. I hate to say it, as much as we love to hate insurance companies. If you say you do something and you don't, that's really not on them, right? We gotta keep that in mind. But there's some interesting things that I've seen in my experience out there going on with the requirements part. And what I've seen is, in a lot of cases, where you used to be able to get 30, 60, 90 days to get things in place as you're signing up, they go, okay, we'll start a policy, but in 90 days, you're going to have MFA rolled out and you're going to have everybody trained and you're going to have that. I've seen a lot more policies being denied or pushed back on very hard if you don't have it in place right now. So instead of giving you 90 days, they're like, well, come back to us when you have it in place. And I hear that's happening on even renewal side, right? Larry, are you seeing that?
Yeah, if at the risk of having a self-serving plug here, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Risk away.
Exactly. That's where it really benefits someone to work with somebody like DataStream, because we are a specialist broker. All we do is work in cyber insurance. So we've got very good relationships out there. And while what Eric just said is absolutely true, if you're not working with somebody that's a specialist in cyber insurance, we have seen in many instances where a customer has said, all right, we will have MFA in place by August the 31st. And we've been able to go ahead and get policies approved based on that. But trust me, come August the 31st, they're going to be checking to see that you carried your end of the bargain. If you haven't, look out. You may not be covered any further past that point. So,
yeah.
Excellent.
And I know Brian and I have definitely gotten those calls on August 30th, saying, "Hey, we got to get an MFA in place now. Can we get this done in one day?" Yeah, you definitely need to plan a lot of these implementations out too, because implementing something like MFA can take a little while to get rolled out, especially to hundreds or thousands of folks in your organization. So definitely from the front end side of the house of those requirements, just kind of my recommendation, plan it out and don't try to do it the last minute for sure. So we've got another poll question for the audience here. Did you receive any new technical requirements at your last cybersecurity insurance renewal? And I know Brian and I have definitely been on the results end of folks saying, yes, I got to do this now for a cyber insurance, or they'll do this, premiums up or cut us off.
Mm.
You're going to let some respond. It's
I'll
getting
take
close
Ben.
to 50-50.
One of the ones that we've seen is that it seemed like EDR was the staple. Like, do you have an EDR and is it one of these? And you were checking the box. But it didn't mean it was deployed right, didn't mean it was managed right, or anybody's looking at it. And so now they're coming in with the requirement of, one, do you have an EDR? Two, do you have an MDR? And that MDR is that managed EDR. And it's, by definition, it should be a 24/7 SOC where there's some live eyes on glass, hands on keyboard, somebody actually taking a response to an event, somebody providing mitigation. And I think that's one of the big ones, Larry. I don't know what you're seeing, but I think that's what we've been seeing recently is it's no longer just okay to have the technology. There needs to be the people and the process in place with it.
you are spot on once again, Michael.
I'm having a good day, Larry.
So Larry, it's actually something I thought of while we were just sitting here discussing. So I'm seeing it more and more. I'll be curious to see if you're seeing it on your end. But it used to be customers could, fill out an application, go through the questionnaire to apply for cyber insurance. Well, now I'm actually seeing insurance companies saying, hey, we're actually going to do either a risk assessment or a network audit. We don't care what you say on a questionnaire. We want the proof that you actually do have that. Are you seeing that more and often?
Mm-hmm. Yep, we definitely are. I mean, there's a couple of different things that happen here. Anytime somebody applies for insurance, that carrier, unbeknownst to you, is doing a quick scan of your domain. It doesn't tell them a whole lot, but it does kind of signal what they might be dealing with once they get a little bit deeper in there. But, exactly as you said, Brian, many of them now, once you kind of get into the questionnaire process or into the application process, they're digging a lot deeper. Because, look, carriers are not the smartest guys out there when it comes to cybersecurity. And I think any of you that have filled out a cyber insurance application can attest to that, because sometimes these questionnaires, some of the questions don't necessarily make sense all of the times. But, carriers are trying to get a heck of a lot better. Mainly, carriers are trying to protect themselves. They don't want to lose money. I mean, there's no lie. Insurance is a for-profit business. But, to Eric's point earlier, we're not always the bad guys. I mean, we're here to help make that business whole, but we're asking you to kind of, share in that risk and make sure that you're on top of the things that you need to be on top of. So you're absolutely right, Brian.
Yeah, and you make a great point there, Larry, that the fact that they're not for profits, right? They are in this for profit. And I know what I saw in the beginning was everybody saw this new something they could sell. It was like cyber insurance. Cool. Oh, yeah. We're going to throw this on there, man. We're just going to be swimming in money. Cyber insurance, right? And then what happens? Well, all the bad actors decide that ransomware is a good thing, and you got, it's expanding into ransomware as a service, which is scaling it ridiculous amounts. And these organizations have literally lost their pants in a lot of cases on their cyber policies. And so now, rightfully, they're kind of going, now hold on a second, let's slow our roll. They're either pulling out of it, or that's what's driving a lot of these things. I mean, I live in Florida, right? We have hurricanes all the time, houses disappear. We have a crisis with people pulling out of Florida for homeowners insurance for exactly the same reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not profitable to be in this. And part of that I've seen is that not only are there new requirements, but sometimes in a lot of cases, they're asking the organization to carry more risk in the form of a deductible. In other words, you have to have some skin in the game. It's not just like, oh, breach, write a check. Yay, here we go. Like, it's going to hurt you, and it's going to hurt the insurance company when they have to write that check too. Am I on that?
Mm-hmm.
You're spot on. Yep, absolutely.
We need to have Larry on more of these. I love how he agrees.
Yes.
Well, I have
Definitely.
to agree when you guys are correct.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we got a few more questions for our panelists here, and just encourage everybody that's listening in on here, if you have questions while we're talking, feel free to bring those to the chat or raise your virtual hand. I'll call out on you to unmute. But the next question for our panelists here is for you, Brian. How can a company be proactive with its cybersecurity insurance?
It's a good question, and I'm having this conversation more and more with our customers. Is as Ben said, we've been in a situation where we've been with our customers during their darkest hours. We know what the pain it is, and it's a really bad time to find out what all is in your policy, what all is it included, what the process is to actually even open up a claim, even the expected timeline of how everything flows along. So as part of the CISO conversations I'm having with our customers is, hey, as a proactive approach is reach out to your carrier, pull down your policy, get the latest copy that you've got, read through the fine print, which I know a lot of us don't like to do that regardless, but you need to understand, what you're saying that you are doing is actually in fact what you're doing. And then at the same time, understand, what the breakdown is of what is covered, what is not covered, what kind of money is associated to that policy. And I'm surprised more and more that a lot of times, even the IT administrators, I mean, I remember from the days that I ran shop, I didn't even have a copy of our policy, that the CFO kept that. So, I'm encouraging more for, IT leadership to get involved and say, hey, get a copy of it. Make sure you fully understand it. Reach out, talk to your agent, make sure you understand the process of picking up the phone and open up a claim.
Yeah, and another thing that came up in our prep sessions for this was like, remember to print out your policy with all the numbers and all the phone numbers. So yes, actually print it out. And Larry, maybe you have some funny stories that are unfortunate stories about that.
I do, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's fantastic. Can't remember if this is a question that's going to come up in a few moments or not, but hopefully most of the folks here on this webinar have an incident response plan. And the reason we're laughing is, guys, I'm not kidding. It may be great that you have an incident response plan, but if it exists in a digital form and you walk into the office tomorrow morning and everything is locked up from some type of security incident, guess what? That incident response plan is not worth a whole lot. So we always say, make sure you print your incident response plan out, lock it in a safe, in a file cabinet, put it somewhere so that when you walk into the office, and this has happened, I hate to laugh, but it has happened a couple of times where people are like, yeah, I had an incident response plan, but I never printed it out and now I can't access it, so I don't know what to do. So yeah, don't make that mistake, please.
Yeah, that's a great point, Larry, because people don't think about that.
Uh-uh.
And they don't think about in their tabletop exercises, what happens, like really think through what happens if I can't get to the internet? How do I contact people? Where's my phone list? How do I get a hold of the attorneys, right? Because these are all people that you're going to be on the phone with pretty darn quickly after a lot of these events, especially a ransomware event. you need to be talking to the lawyers and going, okay, what can I say? What can't I say? And predetermine as much of that as you can. Great. But somebody needs to be able to get a hold of the CEO. And if it's all locked up in the digital world, it can become an issue getting that stuff back, and even if it's on a share that isn't necessarily encrypted, but you can't get to, say, Active Directory or some other authentication device to allow you to actually get to those files. I mean, I've seen all kinds of crazy stuff happen with that it may not have stopped them completely, but it also really slows down the response time, which is the last thing in the world you want to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good points, guys. Good points, especially when, companies are thinking like, hey, how can we prep ourselves for this? That's huge point there. So next question I've got here is for you, Larry. What are some, and this is definitely something people need to pay attention to if you're kind of listening to this in the background on the webinar, but Larry, what are some of the misconceptions about having cybersecurity insurance?
Yeah. Probably the biggest misconception is that cyber insurance is not going to pay out if you have a claim. And nothing could be further from the truth, but at the same time, there is some truth in that statement. And what I mean by that is, it was just mentioned a few moments ago. I don't remember. I think it was Brian that said it. Read the fine print and read your insurance policy, folks. I can't tell you enough. Read your insurance policy, because there are things that you have to do in the event that you do have some type of security incident. And the biggest thing I'm talking about here is documenting the things that you attested to when you applied for the insurance, and then keeping that documentation up to date as hopefully your business continues to grow and you add additional people, additional devices, different things like that, because it's important. Let's say you got 10 employees when you first applied for insurance and you got everybody locked up and all that good stuff. You've got MFA, you got EDR, you got all that stuff taken care of, and you document it. But then all of a sudden you hire 5 more people and you forget to put EDR on their devices, or you forget to put MFA on their devices, or whatever you forget to do security awareness training, whatever it may be. And that's where that breach occurred. Yeah, guess what? They're not going to pay, because you didn't have it there, you didn't have it attested to, all that good stuff. So you got to kind of keep this documentation going throughout the life of the policy. As things change on your end, make sure that you document it. And there's an old joke, he or she who arrives at the court with the biggest stack of paper usually is the one that's going to walk out victorious. And if you think insurance companies aren't going to come with a stack of paper, this thick, they absolutely are. But if yours is a little bit thicker, the chances are pretty good that you're going to end up prevailing.
Interesting. I just like to think of it kind of like homeowners insurance, or even having a new kid. You got to call your insurance company, let them know that there's something
Bingo.
been added on there. You added solar panels to the house or something like that. You need to call the insurance company so it's covered for sure. Same thing when it comes to cybersecurity insurance in your organization. So next question we have here is for Eric. Why is it becoming harder and more expensive to get insurance? And, I think a lot of people will be listening up to this one too.
Yeah, a lot of this goes back to kind of the conversation we had earlier, which is it's costing so much more to insure or to pay out for these things, right? If you look at just ransomware, for example, the year by year increase in the ransom amounts is ridiculous. It was a couple 100,000. Do y'all remember WannaCry, right? When it hit NHS, that wasn't that long ago. Okay. Ransomware back then was like $300 a computer. Ransomware, WannaCry never went above, I think, $300 or $400 per machine, which, some of us, we wish for the good old days when it was just that, right? But now we're talking about, depending on who you're looking at, we're talking about $500,000 average ransom payouts up to $1 million. And then again, you have Sophos comes through and says, hey, you know what? The average ransomware event, the cost more than doubles if you pay the ransom, because of all these ancillary things going on. So the price, the cost to the insurers has gone way, way up because the expense of this is way, way worse. And, to Michael's point earlier, we also have the regulatory fines to think of. If you look at all these organizations, if you have a website and you sell stuff, how do you know it's not to a UK citizen whose information you just got breached, and now GDPR is looking at you funny, and California is looking at you funny, and someone in New York is, all of these different areas are looking at you, trying to get you to pay up for what went wrong here. Man, that gets expensive and complicated in a hurry. So I think that's what makes it more expensive and making it harder is the fact that so many times we've seen where these things have started with the same things and that people aren't fixing it. So this is why they say you've got to have MFA. I love MFA, but MFA is not foolproof. But man, from the insured sides or the insurer side, they're going, this could probably block a lot of that. I think I've heard some numbers going around that were pretty high percentages that they feel they wouldn't have had to pay on had these people had MFA, and it's the same thing with the awareness training. Once a year does nothing for somebody, but if you do it quarterly and you make it part of the culture, people learn from that and it's more effective. It's the same sort of things. This is why they're requiring the things they're doing, because they've been writing these enormous checks. And if you don't think some bean counter isn't sitting back, sobbing softly to themselves while they're signing these big checks, you're wrong. It hurts them too.
Eric, you were talking about some of those numbers, and it was Microsoft. Microsoft in March, it was March or April, I think it was March, they came out and said that only 32% of users in the ecosystem are using MFA, and it's 1 million plus accounts every month, and 99.3% of them are not using MFA that are being compromised.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate that, and it's not difficult. I mean, everybody is a little frustrated. Oh, it's going to take me so much longer to get in. Let's be honest, the way MFA is working today with the push technologies, and I have the option to click accept. I mean, I can even catch it from my Apple Watch. If you get the right technology, like a Cisco Duo or an Evo Security, or even the Microsoft one, it'll put the push notification on your watch and I can click accept. So it's way too easy, and it might honestly take me an additional 3 to 5 seconds to use MFA if you're doing it the right way, which it's nothing.
Well, and most platforms support it too, natively. I mean, even all the social media platforms, how many people have MFA connected on their social media platforms? Those accounts are getting taken over all the time and scamming people. I hear about it all the time. They call me up. They're like, oh my gosh, my Facebook account got hacked and now they're selling puppies to people. Honest to God, real true story. They're selling puppies to people in the neighborhood that are getting mad because they're ripping them off. Well, it was password reuse because they use the same password somewhere else. The bad actors get a hold of this. And because there's no MFA involved, boom, they're in the accounts. Well, the same thing happens in corporate accounts too. So yeah, great point on that.
And there's free ones out there. I mean, even in your personal life, like if you're looking for an easy one, Google Authenticator.
Yeah.
It's free.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost you anything. And it works really well.
So many things support it just natively.
It's just breaking the mindset. I mean, we sit here and, we do it ourselves in our personal lives to log into our bank accounts or log in to pay our bills, but it's just breaking the mindset that needs to be part of the corporate culture as well.
Well, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but Brian, to defend the people on the other side of this, us security goobers, we go out there and we tell them, well, you need to take an extra step to do exactly what you've been doing for the last 10 years. Trust us, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. It's all good, right? And so if they don't understand why that's actually important, it just feels like we're adding more for them to do to get the exact same result. And I don't know about you, but if I have a boss coming up, and they're like, well, I need you to fill out this form in triplicate, but, no carbon copies or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like, we need this filled out 2 more times just because, man, I'm going to push back on that. Well, that's what the same people do if they don't understand why it's such an issue. That's the human side of MFA, is making sure they understand that.
Well, I always take it back in any type of security conversation that IT professionals are having with upper management, but then to the users in their environment, is I always try to tell them like, hey, it's protecting company assets, but we're also doing education, MFA, all these other things for your personal as well. Because you need to know this, because these threat actors aren't just coming after businesses.
No.
They're coming after personal people as well. And so the more that our business spends money on educating you, preventing you from harming company assets, that's just going to get you better on your personal side as well. So I always, that's how you get through a lot of the buy-in from your, stubborn users that are out there in your organization. I mean, I know every time that I take one of the know before videos that we use internally here at Davenport Group, anytime we do that, I usually call my mom and dad after that. I'm like, hey, just be on the lookout for this, and tell your friends, because my parents are older, but yet they're still very digital in how they operate. And they just don't know, unless you educate them. They're not in a company anymore. They're retired. So got to educate them. So remind that personal side out there.
Yeah, because
So
the
with
weakest point is all of us. It's the human.
Yes.
It's not
It
the
is.
technology or the processes. It's us. We are the weak point.
But don't go around telling your people, your employees, that they're the weak point, right? We have to understand that we have to understand that's not necessarily their fault. They're just targeted a whole lot. And if they're not given the tools and resources to defend themselves, who's that really on, right? I mean, we've got messaging we've got to get out there. To Ben's point, look, this isn't just about the organization. We live in a digital world, and you've got to learn to protect yourself against that. But yeah, we do have to be careful with that messaging when we're like, hey, you're the biggest problem in the organization security wise. We should probably couch that a little bit lighter, okay?
Yeah. And Bill, in our chat, even said we had some agents benefit from know before training in their own families.
Awesome.
So that's good to know. Good to know.
Yep.
So
It
does impact personal stuff.
Yeah, we have
Definitely.
a family, like a home version of that's available too. It's free, and it's designed for kids up to the old folks like me.
Well, I'll sign up my parents and my kids and get them.
Perfect.
You have to do that before we turn on your iPad. So you got to do that.
No more
There you go, lock
Roblox
'em
for
up.
you unless you do the
Exactly.
training.
Exactly. Oh man, teach them early. So with that, we got another poll question here. Christy, bring it. Great. When did you last review all the print on your policies? And so we've got some probably answers on there, but we've got a real honest number 4, I feel.
I think for most people, if it's a choice between going in for a root canal every day for a week and reviewing the fine print, they're going to go for the root canal side. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Michael, didn't you say you had somebody that actually loves to do this?
I do. I am so incredibly fortunate that my CFO, who's also our COO, she's a contracts person. It's what she loves to do. She loves the fine print. She likes getting into it. She likes redlining the hell out of things. And so I am incredibly fortunate that I know every time we come up for a review, because she also explains it to me. She comes back and tells me what I need to know, and she brings it down to crayon style, so it works for me.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it is painful, but I think it's really necessary too, because that's the point where you're not standing there with this policy in your hand going, but I thought it meant, and again, I'd like to point out, to Ben's point, this doesn't mean that it's all your responsibility as a cyber person, but you have that mindset when you're looking at this that understands probably a little bit more than your leadership does too. Somebody in leadership should probably be reviewing this as well. What do you think about that, Larry?
Say again, please. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Eric, I got distracted with a thing that came in here.
No problem. No, it's not just the IT folks' responsibility to be doing this, but they can give a good technical view. Leadership needs to be reviewing that as well and figuring out, does this bridge the gap in the risk that I'm accepting? And because ultimately they're in charge of risk of the organization, right?
No, you are absolutely right. And it kind of goes back to one of those earlier points we were talking about. It's not just the IT department's responsibility anymore. It really is. It's at the leadership, because cyber risk is the biggest risk that the majority of businesses are facing right now. Once again, because it is a dynamic risk that is changing minute by minute by minute. So, and more, I'm encouraged, because I do see that we're not always just talking to the IT guy or the CISO, but now the CFO is involved, the CEO is involved, the COO is involved. They're taking this threat seriously because they realize what this could do to their business and to their livelihood. So, no, great point. And sorry, I missed you at the first point there.
No problem. And to your point there too. I mean, boards and executives are being held accountable.
Yes.
These days, they can't just go, "Oh, it was the technical goober over here," and throw all the weight on the IT folks and go, "Oh, you bad, evil people, we'll replace you." Right? I mean, that was what they used to do back in the day, but they've gotten kind of smarter about that, and now boards are being held accountable, and they're having to look around, going, "I kind of need to know at least a little bit about this." I think.
Well, and it's good because, and the reason that I see that happening, sadly, but it's true, is those boards of directors and the CFOs, the CISOs, those COOs, they're hearing through their peer network that, you know, one of their peers was a victim, and they saw, you know, for lack of a better term, they saw their buddy go through it, and they saw what the outcome was, and they saw what it did to that board or that COO. And they're like, you know, I want to get involved now because this really could land at my desk.
Yep.
You are so right.
Sure. So with respect to everybody's time today, we got just a little under 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure we get enough time at the end for folks' questions to hand there. So I'm going to skip to the last question, and I'll start with you, Eric. But I would like to hear from every panelist on here. But Eric, first with you, how can each of your organizations help those needing cybersecurity insurance?
Yeah, I mean, from our standpoint, again, we have it's a platform for security awareness training. Then we do simulated social engineering tests too. So you can do, different kinds of stuff. You can do text messages or whatever. You know, we can even do like USB drops if you want to do that kind of stuff and leave them around. But we can do the education. We can track all that stuff, which, you know, to Larry's point and stuff, it's something that you're easily tracked. Now, I've been in an auditing world too when I was in the DoD, and it's always nice when you go in to do an audit and they go, well, show me all of these people and when they trained or show me this, and you're able to pull it up, print it out, and go, here you go, whack, and throw it right at them. That, as an auditor, always made me feel like, oh, these people got it together, as opposed to, well, we're going to have to dig through this. That kind of stuff is invaluable. And not just when we're talking cyber insurance, but your SOC 2s and stuff like that, where they're looking for point in time sorts of things. So the reporting, and that's on top of hopefully avoiding the requirement to call Larry and go, hey, bro, need to make a claim, right? The idea being we get ahead of it. People learn, they report, we move on without having to make that claim. I don't know, Larry, if you make a claim, how easy is it to renew, or do your prices go up? I don't know that, but I can make assumptions based on other insurance in the world.
And Larry,
Yes.
how can you help out folks listening in here?
So it's hard to say this without sounding self-serving, but I think there's probably not a person on this call that doesn't know somebody in their family or their friendship base that is in insurance. And that's fantastic. If they're in insurance, that's absolutely fine. However, the vast majority of local agents or brokers don't understand cyber insurance. They don't specialize in it. And it's, I always use this analogy. We've all got a general practitioner, a family doctor that we go to for allergies, for blood pressure, for physicals and stuff like that. Yet if all of a sudden you find out you need to have quadruple bypass surgery, are you going to let your family doctor do that? Or are you going to go to a specialist because that's what they focus on and that's what they specialize in? Again, I know I sound self-serving. Find yourself somebody that specializes in cyber insurance because they really understand what they're doing, and they work with people like Solutions Granted, like Davenport Group. They're working with specialists in cybersecurity, and they talk to these people, hundreds of these people all the time. So they stay on top of what's going on, and they're going to be able to best serve you. And, one of the biggest things we see, and somebody mentioned it over here in the chat, a lot of what we see is businesses are vastly underinsured, and that's because they've worked with somebody that didn't really understand this. So I implore you to please work with a specialist broker that can help you out with this. So there you go.
I don't know, Larry.
Couldn't
I think
agree
if my
more.
general watches a couple of YouTube videos on triple bypass, he's in, man. I mean, I totally trust him with that. It's
Yeah.
I'm going to stand back and see what your results are.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Michael, so what about you and the folks, the team you've got there at Solutions Granted?
And so I think everybody's seen it. We're hearing it. We're talking about it. People are talking about the need for EDR. They're talking about the need for XDR. They're talking about the need for MDR. We are a serious industry of acronyms is what it is. But very simply put, my organization has those acronyms in place, but it's not just about an acronym. It's really about the people. It's about the process to try to head this off. We are here to make sure that when that thing goes bump in the middle of the day or the night or whenever it is, we see it, we respond to it, we put mitigation and response in place. So that way you don't have to call Larry. Or maybe if you do, you lost a lampshade in the corner of one of your rooms and it wasn't the entire house burning down. We're here for that.
Yep.
Awesome. And then Brian, what can we do here? What have you built here really at Davenport Group?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, exactly why I was a customer and now I'm an employee is, we build the relationships. We get in close. We find out what our customers are really needing and get to the root of it, whether it's pulling down and reviewing their insurance policy with them, reading through the fine print, making sure they understand it is, part of the, like a CISO service, or even delivering managed services, for these things like Michael talked about, MDR, backed by an XDR platform, MFA. We're making sure that our customers are checking those boxes and got good solutions in place, and we're doing the right things, whether it be solutions, managed services, whatever it might be. But then, of course, we work closely with our friends like we brought on today. I mean, these are the people that we trust. They, like Larry said, the specialists. We make sure that we bring good quality, and deliver that to our customers.
Yeah, and I've been, for the first time since I've been here at Davenport Group in the last 10 years, I can fully go into a customer's environment and say, hey, really anything security, we can help you out with it. So if it's just a point product or a one little solution, or if you want us to take care of everything for you, we can help you out with that. And that's what Brian has really built here, and really appreciate Brian and all the dedication he's done for our customers and will continue to do and grow that side to really help out customers. And I think all four of you have really helped out some folks listening on here today. And I want to thank you all for participating in this panelist discussion. I know we've enjoyed just getting to know each other over these last few weeks, getting prepared for that. And so what we'll do is we'll stay on here to answer any questions that folks have for any of our panelists. If you want to either come off mute or put your question here in the chat, we'll answer those. We'll probably stay on here for another, probably at least 10 minutes for anybody that wants to ask questions. So I'll open that up to anybody on the webinar.
Ben, there was one good question that came in, and I
Yeah.
think, Larry, I want to get your point on this, but I've got an opinion on it. It was like the current problem, and this was from Jim. He's talking about cyber insurance and the caveat on the policy where you're not allowed to take any action before you contact the carrier. So we do a lot of incident response work after somebody has been compromised, and that has not been my experience. Now, look, am I asking you to disturb the system state and power systems down and do all of those things? No, absolutely not. But you can do some simple things. I mean, you can shut off the internet, because part of a compromise isn't just about the potential encryption. There could be data exfiltration that's taking place. And if they're in there and you happen to catch them in the act and you don't get them out one way or another, the problem gets worse, and it gets a little bit worse, and it gets a little bit worse. So shutting down internet access, pulling a cable out of a server if you have to physically put your hands on it, maybe just disconnecting the internet by shutting down the firewall. I've not seen, and Larry, you've got more on this than I do, but I've not seen where anybody has been hung out to dry or an insurance company says, oh no, we're done with you. You took action.
Yeah, no, Michael, you're absolutely right. I think, that is a logical first step, is just kind of cut the internet off, unplug it, just unplug it, But at that point, that's when some of the carriers are kind of like, hold on, we kind of want to get in there and try to figure things out and get our IT forensics in there and all of that good stuff. So, and look, guys, here's part of the problem with cyber insurance. I mean, it's only been around since roughly about 1997, 1998, right around then. So from an insurance perspective, it's in its infancy still. So it's pretty much the Wild West. There's not a whole hell of a lot of standards out there. So some carriers may tell you don't touch a damn thing. Other carriers may say, no, it's okay. Just unplug the internet. Most of the carriers are going to say, yeah, cut off the source, unplug that internet, get rid of it, but then wait till we give you further directions. And then the other thing, I can't stress this enough, the first phone call, pick up the phone and call the attorney and then call your insurance company. So that's where the first phone call ought to be, because the attorney is going to steer you right. Hopefully.
And to your point, Larry, I mean, if you have a physical crime scene, you don't want to be stomping around through that the same way you can a digital crime scene, right? And so it's not meant, I don't think, to be a harsh thing. But a lot of times what I've seen with these policies too is the insurers oftentimes have contracts with specialists that can come in and do this, the digital forensics goobers, right? And you don't want to send, the joke always being in IT, I've got a cousin in IT who, works at this little shop. He just got out of school or whatever, right? You don't want to send that guy in to go digging around through logs and doing all these kinds of things that are going to disrupt it. You want to let the pros do that. And the insurers oftentimes already have these people who you may not be able to get otherwise already on retainer to be able to come in. I mean, if you think that, you just pick up the phone and call one of these top tier incident response groups and say, hey, my name is Bob, I have a bakery and I'd like you to come in and do this stuff, right? They've got 1,000 other things going on, but that's where the insurance can actually, I've seen it help people because they already have folks on retainer and they're able to get in there quickly and start looking at this and going, okay, cool. Because I mentioned before reinfection. Well, if you don't know how they got in, you don't know what they did, you're going to have a real hard time closing that door behind them.
For sure. Bring in the experts there for sure. And I know we're coming up, we're a little past time here. I want to be respectful for everybody's time. Krista put it in the chat, but I want to make sure, because we don't want you to be hungry while you're implementing your cybersecurity measures. And we want to also thank you for joining us today and listening to our panel. We want you to enjoy a customized snack from Snack Magic on us. So whether you're a fan of sweet or salty, they have something for everyone. And what you'll need to do to get that, you'll need to email marketing@davenportgroup.com and just include the word cybersecurity in there so we know that you listened all the way through to our panelists here. And we just really want to thank you for joining us. Also want to remind you that your local account executive with Davenport Group will be following up with you. So if you like some of the information you heard here, want a deeper dive conversation around any of these things, anything security, or going all the way back to slide 2 around any of the solutions that Davenport Group provides, your local account executive will be reaching out to you to set up follow-up conversations. I encourage you to do that. We can actually get in touch with all these panelists if you want to just follow up with them specifically on any of these topics. We're happy to help. And we hope you had an absolutely great time listening to us today. We got a lot of good kudos in the chat. So thank you, panelists, for your time here. And really appreciate everybody's time here. We'll probably stay on here another 5 minutes, just if there's lingering questions for folks that are staying on. But really appreciate everybody attending the webinar today, and we will be in touch. Your local account executive will be in touch to follow up with you on this. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day if you need to go. But if you have a question, hang on and ask away.
And now this is the awkward silence part.
Yeah.
We're waiting for
I feel
somebody
like-
to
I don't feel
unmute
like
and ask
anybody
a
wants to
question.
play Stump the Chump. And normally I'm
this
the
is-
chump, so let's,
This is Jim. I've got plenty of questions.
well-
We could be here the rest of the day.
All right. let's bring them.
Well, go ahead, Jim. Do you have a question?
Yeah, no, I'm the one who put the little comment in there about that. Our policy specifically states that I am not allowed to take any action until they tell me it's okay. and even unplug. Well, I work for I have police department and fire and public safety on mine. If I disconnect the internet, public safety is in risk, at risk.
Yeah.
So that's always concerns me. Although I am going to print out my policy and read the fine print just so
Yep.
I can be
Awesome.
in. Yeah.
And you may
And-
want to ask for clarification on that,
Bingo.
frankly, and say, hey, you
Right.
know what is okay, what isn't okay, because there are certain systems you would want to unplug before they would be
Right.
able to infect and hit some of these other more critical systems. I mean, Colonial
Right,
Pipeline,
exactly.
it didn't hit their OT stuff, right? That was their internal network. They pulled the plug because they
Mhm.
didn't want it to start taking out all this OT stuff, right?
Right. And,
So-
and that, yeah, and that's my, if I see it happening, if I can stop as much damage as possible, I'm going to do that, just because then it's not going to cost me $2 million in recovery. It might only cost me 100,000, but if
Yeah.
they're going to go, well, sorry, you took action without our approval, why do I have cyber insurance?
I'm not
Yeah,
going to
but,
lie. I've made that sprint to the server room to unplug that
Yeah.
Ethernet cord before. If we've been around for a while, we've all done that. As you're picturing where it's plugged in the rack as you're running down the hallway, right? We've kind of been there, and I think that's a pretty standard response.
Right.
But you have to do it smartly, of course.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah.
And Jim, I think even like, they write things in ways that are beneficial to them that keeps it as black and white as possible. But if they're mandating that you have MDR, well, an MDR has a mitigation response to it. And that mitigation response is to do something. And a lot of times it's an isolation and containment moment. Hey, I know for a fact these credentials have been compromised. I know for a fact it's happening on this device. I'm going to put a virtual wrapper around it. I'm going to make sure that it doesn't bleed out anywhere else into the network, which is an action, which is somebody doing something.
Right.
You're not disturbing the state of the machine. So it's probably a good idea, like Eric said, just call them, clarify it,
Yeah.
say, hey,
Right.
Yeah.
if I pull the Ethernet cable or if I shut down the ISP's presence, am I really negating my contract with you because I've done something? If I pull the cable to the NIC card, and you don't want to power the system down, because if you
Right.
power the system down, you're going to lose what's in volatile memory. You're going to potentially lose other logs, and you don't want to do that. But you definitely want to take some of those preventative, proactive steps. I've even gone to the point where people are having a tough time talking to their insurance company. And it's like, well, what do I do? And it's like, look, change the passwords. Change the passwords now, because if they're in there while you're waiting for the forensics team, well, what you can guarantee is they're going to have a hell of a hard time coming back in. They're going to come back
Right.
in. My
Yeah.
guess is they've got some keylogger or something else in there, but changing passwords. Again, I'm not an attorney, so you don't want me giving you legal advice, but that one hasn't hurt anybody that I'm aware of.
No.
Yeah.
Right. And that's my point. I know I'm not an attorney either, but I know there are some actions that I can take as an IT guy to mitigate the damage that they're able to do to the system. But if my hands are tied, they're tied, I'm still going to do it, and I'll let my lawyer fight with you over it.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, nope.
that's it, Jim. It goes back to that proactive approach. Sit down with them, even show them your incident response plan, and say, hey, does this line up with your expectations? And if not, then you need to tell me how we can get on the same page, because I know how long it might take for you to get back to me, and I know how much damage can be done in between that time. So let's try to find some middle ground.
And then get it in writing, not in an email that's going to be encrypted that you'll
Right.
never be able to pull up.
Print that out and
Right?
staple it to the policy. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
That needs
exactly.
to be
Exactly.
page one on there on the bottom for sure.
Hey, well, I
Well, great.
appreciate it,
Thanks.
guys.
Hey, no problem.
Absolutely. Thank you for
Thanks, Jim.
joining us, Jim, and thanks for the questions there.
Yep. Thank you.
All
man.
right. Y'all have a good one.
Yep. Take
You
care.
You too.
And we got a couple more minutes. If anybody's got another question, feel free to come off mute or put it in the chat there.
Don't be shy. Most of us are nice.
Well, it's like anytime I do a security webinar or presentation, I always start out with it. It's like dirty laundry. Nobody wants to talk about their security.
Yeah.
They don't want to hang it out there in front of their peers. So
Well, no,
usually
you're the trust tree here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, the
think
problem is many of the peers have experienced something similar, or someone they know has experienced something similar, and we can help each other in that case. That's where it gets a little bit tricky there sometimes with, I'll do the talks and I'll say, hey, you don't have to raise your hand if you don't want to, but who's been scammed by this rather simple looking scam, like a gift card scam, and people will raise their hands, but then other people, as we discuss it, other people are going, I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought about this. I wasn't really aware of that. And so they can learn from that. But I really haven't had anyone turn around and go, oh my gosh, your people were dumb enough to fall for a gift card scam, as the 30 other people in the room turn to, choke them out. But it's just one of those things that we feel like we're the only ones in that situation. And that's rarely the case.
And Eric, the reason that we feel like we're the only ones in this situation is because we're not opening up about it. We're not
Exactly.
talking about it. We're not sharing our experiences to help others learn from it. I saw that, when the Kaseya compromise took place, there's eventually some partners that came out not to talk about the compromise, but to talk about what the impact was to them at a personal level, the amount of hours that they worked, the amount of sleepless hours. One guy in particular, the amount of the cases, not cans, the cases of Red Bull that they went through. So I mean, but you're seeing like there's just the amount of hours they went without eating and the damage that it actually does, not just to your body, but your mind. And if you're destroying yourself because you're trying to do the right thing, well, then, there's some there's damaging impact to the actions that you take next. So I think as an industry, we have to stop hiding from the problems personally. And I think we have to start sharing the experiences and talking about it. And we don't have to tell everything.
Yeah.
But if we've done something wrong, it's like, so being in the Army, it was, the 11 principles of leadership, and something that the Army came out with and implemented in 1951, that in 1989, they're still teaching as you're coming in. And, it's really interesting. It's seeking responsibility and taking responsibility for your actions. If you did it wrong, just say you did it wrong.
Yeah.
And then come back with I'm going to do it right the next time. And here's how. That accounts for a lot. And it really does. And if we start doing that more with one another and trusting in one another, I think we'll find that we can take some of the power away from these threat actors and the way they're taking advantage of us, because now we unite together.
Unfortunately, sometimes. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Eric.
Well, I was going to say, unfortunately, sometimes it's not in our hands whether or not we can speak about it. Let's look at the. There was this company. Oh yeah, Uber. Right. Okay. And everything is like hush hush and things were covered up. And of course it ends up coming out. Right. And it always seems to come out eventually. Right. Somebody has to do an SEC filing or something happens where it comes out. But there are times where the attorneys and the leadership and these groups say, don't talk about it, especially in private companies where they may not have to report something. Right. We do see that the SEC just did the thing that was talked about where, if you're a publicly traded company and it's a material issue, then you have to report it. Of course, there's going to be lawyers arguing over exactly what material definition are we using here, right? Yeah. So there's all of that goes along, but there are times we can't talk about it. But what I will say is we can still work off that experience. So I worked for the Army for, a long time. I was the security manager over classified and unclassified networks. There was a guy named Snowden that caused me some late days and things, right? So you can imagine there are things I can't talk about, but I can talk about experiences that I've seen where, hey, if this happens, then, maybe we want to consider this. I don't have to say this was part of that or I learned this because that happened, but we've got to learn how to communicate a little bit better. And I do think we need to do stuff. And you brought up a great point too, not just to keep going here, but the mental health part of this side of things. We oftentimes don't handle very well. This is a high stress job where you're on call 24/7, 365 for the most part. And we oftentimes don't unplug well. And we don't want to talk about the difficulties we have because we all want to look like rock stars on social, right?
Yeah. Sharing is caring, I think I think that was a Care Bear slogan.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Definitely.
was that or G.I. Joe. No, G.I. Joe was knowing is half the battle. That's right.
Yeah,
Yes.
there you go. Well, mix those two and that'll help you for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, it's having more of these conversations. It's with guys like you, and even if we can just get people to say, "Hey, I know a guy," and once they realize how close they really are to everyone else. I mean, nothing's ever going to be perfect. There's no silver bullet. And once you realize that you're doing a lot of the same things as your peers are doing, it starts becoming more relevant. It's good conversation.
Yeah, I had a
For sure.
I do a couple podcasts, and on one of those, and I'm not trying to bogart the time here, guys. Shut me up whenever you want. One of you is an admin and can mute me. But one of my guests, she was talking about how she was working at Microsoft, and she was a pretty big wig in Microsoft area, and she started having physical problems where like she was having physical problems walking and things like this. And she went to her doctor, and the doctor was like, "Oh yeah, you work at Microsoft, right?" Like it was systemic that people pushed themselves so hard that they had this. And so she stepped back and said, wait a minute, this is a problem. And I love talking to people like that recognize that, and they're not afraid to say, this was my experience. It doesn't mean I'm weak. It just means that this is a problem that's out there. So we have gone a straight left turn off of our original discussion here, but it is important that we have these talks. And hey, if anyone's going to be at Black Hat or DEF CON, I would love to have a beer with somebody, anybody that's still on, and just talk about stuff. I'll be there.
And I think this is definitely warranted where we set up some further security conversations, maybe even a deeper dive into cybersecurity insurance, even more. But you'll continue to see these security conversations from Davenport Group webinars for those that are still on here. Um, Sorry. For those that are still on here, really appreciate your time today and attention to our panelists here. Panelists, thank you very much for the time today. Really enjoyed the conversation. This was fantastic. So with that, I know we went over, but I think we covered a lot of information here. We will be following up with you, and really appreciate everybody's time today. And with that, we'll close up the webinar. Have a great rest of your day.
See you,
Thanks, everybody.
Take
Bye.
care, everyone.
Thanks all.
Appreciate it, guys.
Cheers.